First, I just want to thank everyone for coming out today. I'm here mainly because as the Federal Highway Administration, I thought you heard Dr. Myers talk about the dollars. Well, I'm one of the large dollar suppliers. We tend to supply MnDOT somewhere between in the neighborhood of $500 million plus or minus 50 or 60 million a year. Most of that goes towards construction contracts since they tend to do most everything else in-house. And we have the federal DBE program and are responsible with working with MnDOT to make that program better than it's been in the past. And I come with a passion for wanting to do that. And I've been here all of 2 years come January, so I'm rather new, which gives me the ability to ask a lot of why and what if questions since I don't have a history of being here in Minnesota. My history comes from mostly the Southeast, places like Louisiana, South Carolina, and Arkansas. So that's kind of my background on the topic, and why I'm here is to help discuss top ways of unbundling projects. And I've had some experience with that in my past states that I've worked in.
Thanks, Joe. Mary?
Hi, I'm Mary Prescott, MnDOT's Office of Civil Rights Director. We at MnDOT have been involved in what's called the DBE and Workforce Collaborative. When Commissioner Sorrell was appointed back in the summer of 2008, one of the first things that he did as new commissioner was convene a group of 8 stakeholder groups. And those 8 stakeholder groups include, I don't want to leave anybody out, general contractors, disadvantaged business enterprise contractors, training organizations, unions, business workforce advocates, non-union contractors, and workforce, FHWA, and MnDOT, to come together. And the collaborative's mission is to have the contractors and the workforce participation in the transportation industry in Minnesota reflect the demographics of the state. So that's been the mission almost for 2 years now, and they've been convening monthly, and they've broken into 11 project teams. I just want to give you a little breakdown. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the workforce side, but I will on the DBE side. We were lucky enough to pull Emma Corey out of our Human Resources office, and she's come on board to help facilitate the project management of that collaboration, and has been doing a wonderful job for us as far as getting our group together and make sure we're focusing, but most importantly, making sure that each of these 11 project teams are showing results for the state of Minnesota. So that's kind of been our focus for the last 2 years. The project teams, and I'm just going to say them briefly, I could spend 45 minutes alone on each one of these project teams, but on-the-job training programs to increase diverse workforce on projects, OJT training and tracking, mentor-protege program, who is led by Abe Bassan is with us today. He's our business development advisor. We've got 11 mentor-protege agreements signed as of this last week, so I think Dr. Myers talked about that program, and that's been very successful. We've got the DBE and Good Faith Efforts work team, coordinated access for recruitment, working capital fund that hopefully I'll get to talk about a little bit later, results transparency, civil rights training program, targeted group program. I see Robert Woods is here with us today. He's assisting leading that. And we had one coding dual goals that has been put on hold right now, but we hope to someday take a look at that again. So we've been working on these 11 projects teams. We've got a long way to go in the state of Minnesota in the transportation industry. We totally realize that. We're off to a good start. In the area of the Minnesota's DBE program, you've heard the national goal is at 10%. Our goal for Minnesota is 8.75, and we took a little different approach as far as our compiling of that goal. It included a nearest study of 15%, it included census data, and then it included the bidding estimating. So that 8.75, we're currently at 5.6 participation out of that goal. We've still got a long way to go, and we're looking forward to working with everybody to move that forward.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you. My name is James Posey, and I'm from Portland. It's not Oregon. It's Oregon.
Oregon.
I just want to make sure we did.
That's a typical Minnesota thing. We always do that.
Yeah,
so sorry about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's a real pleasure to be here, and I was invited, and I'd like to think I'm here because I'm a real contractor. I do asphalt, I do dump trucks, I do excavation, I actually have dirt under my fingernails. If anybody want to check it out a little later on.
He does.
I'm here really kind of representing our national organization, National Association of Minority Contractors, and Francis Olawu, who is our president. Would you please stand? He's our national president. Organization for 40 years who've been dealing with these issues, and Francis is our president. We have Kathy Myers, and I think Carlos. Where's Carlos? He's back there somewhere. Well, in any case, there are members that are here who really are the recipients of these programs and really have been struggling with these programs for a number of years, and so it's very appropriate that we're here to talk about those issues that are affecting us and how we can solve it. And this panel has to do with unbundling contracts, but there are some larger issues. There's only one small aspect of really those problems and issues that are affecting minority contractors. And of course, I'll talk about that as we go forward in the program. But I just want to take the time to say I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's a warm welcome so far, and boy, it's really chilly here, frankly. So I wanted to ask questions about Dr. Meyer's presentation because there is a lot of hoopla around all the programs and the various aspects, but at the end of the day, these programs are pretty much focused on the issue of discrimination. And the issue of discrimination is sort of been overshadowed by some of the process kinds of issues related to these programs. And we have to get, as Dr. Meyer says, we can't solve the problem unless we really know what the problem is. We got to identify and define what the problem is, and then we have to focus on addressing the problem. And if we allow ourselves to be distracted and unfocused about what the real issues are, then we wind up doing virtually nothing. And I want to talk about that a little bit as we move forward in my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And yes, it's a little cold outside. You're not as warm as you are in Oregon.
We'll work with you on that.
Well, I'm from New Orleans, so people mispronounce that a lot too.
Gotcha.
Good morning. My name is Wanda Kirkpatrick, and I am the Director of Equal Opportunity at the Metropolitan Council. This discussion, this panel, is supposed to be about unbundling. So let me tell you a little bit about the Metropolitan Council and that theory. Right now, as you all know, we're getting ready to do one of the largest public works projects in the state of Minnesota, and that is the Central Corridor. One of the things that I think is very important as far as unbundling and the DBE program as a whole is that you get everyone in your agency, everyone, to understand what the program is about. It is not just the DBE office's responsibility to ensure that the DBE program is done and done correctly for your agency. Everyone from the very top of the agency, which is our chairperson, is the chair, Peter Bell, all the way down to the administrative person in the procurement office, has to understand what the program is about. That happened in our light rail project that we're doing on Central Corridor, and Dr. Meyer talked about you don't want 27 projects or 27 contracts on one project because you don't want to have to do that. Well, we did that for the Central Corridor project. Now, it's not as small as, we all would have liked it, but we still have several different projects. I think it's 5 projects with one for the cars, and that's totally different. But we have divided up that large, huge, almost billion-dollar project into smaller contracts. And the reason they did that is because of discussion way back in Hiawatha time of how we have to ensure that the people in Minnesota can bid on our projects, that even if someone from Minnesota doesn't get the large project, someone in Minnesota then, someone either from Minnesota or our DBEs can bid on the projects. Not very many of our Minnesota contractors can bid on $1 billion project. We divided that up because of a conscious decision to do that, because DBEs are a part of everything we do in procurement. You cannot have a procurement office that doesn't understand or want to understand the DBE program. You can't have facilities and engineering, and that's who our project managers are at the Metropolitan Council. You can't have them not understanding what the DBE program is. You must have training for those folks too, and you must, as all of the people who are on my staff at the Metropolitan Council were chosen because they have a passion for the work. You have to have a passion for that work because you know how hard it is. Anybody in here not know how hard? It's very hard. And so you have to have a passion for that work. And they take that passion and pass it down so that our facility and engineers, our project managers understand when they see a truck or a person with a hard hat that doesn't say the DBE's name on it, they report it immediately and say, where's the DBE? What's going on? Why isn't the DBE doing this work? And then we have an opportunity to go out and find out what's going on. Why isn't the DBE doing this kind of work? That is essential. It cannot just be the Office of Civil Rights issue. It has to be your entire agency. You cannot do it without it. And if you try to do it just from your office, it's not going to work. We all at the Metropolitan Council, as they say, have each other's back. If you don't do that, it is not going to work. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. Tim?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tim Warkey. I represent the Associated General Contractors. We're a building and construction trade association here in Minnesota, both highway builders who I manage and vertical building contractors. I've been involved in these issues for a number of years, but I'm the consummate generalist in what I do, and I have become more learned in these issues and in their complexity over the past 3 years or so, to the point, Lee, where I think now my graduate degree from the U could be upgraded to at least maybe my bachelor's degree could at least be maybe a graduate degree in some of the continuing ed hours I've put in on these issues. And they are important, and I don't mean that remark to reflect. They are definitely important, and we need to do better, and we need to perform better. And Mary mentioned the DBE and workforce. I need to mention as well. Workforce collaborative, improving both the participation of DBE businesses, but also improving the employment numbers for women and minorities on construction projects. And when that group came together, my initial first meeting, I made some statements, and I still think those statements hold true, and I've tried to be true to those statements and represent them from the general contractor's perspective and be honest about those statements. And a couple of those things that I was outspoken about is that the program is not working. It is certainly not working for DBEs, and it's not working for the general contractors. And we needed to be serious about that, and we needed to take a look at that. And I think we have, within that group, we have done that. And I also said that in order for the program to improve for DBEs, it needed to be workable, and it needed to be understandable and manageable from a general contractor perspective. Because at the end of the day, general contractors want to know what the rules are, and how are they implied, and how are they applied, and how are they implemented. Because they're very competitive. You all are business. A lot of you folks are business people. You're very competitive, both within your own business and with each other. And so it's important to know, are you going to be measured under the same standards as your competition? And with respect to that, to my statements at those first collaborative meetings, that this was not going to be a destination. And I like to say that. We're not going to arrive someday and say, wow, we achieved the goal or we exceeded the goal. It's a journey. It is something that we are going to continue to have to work on. We are going to continue to have to improve. And from that was an understanding on my part that I was outspoken about, that we need to, as general contractors and as other community stakeholders, need to be consistently engaged. Engagement in this was something that I'm passionate about. If you're going to make a difference, you have to show up, and you have to have a commitment to that. And I think as general contractors, I'm confident in saying we have showed up. We have tried to think about things differently from a different perspective. And I think there are some successes. Hopefully we can talk about some of those as we go through this program. But it is a long-term commitment. It is going to take some time to change these programs and improve them. The other piece is that these programs are very, very complex. I'm sure some of you have, or a lot of you, if you deal with these programs, are familiar with the regulations. You've looked at them. You've tried to understand them. I deal with that stuff every day. I've looked at it often, and a lot of things need interpretation. They need further development, further guidance, etc. The average person, I try to think of myself oftentimes as a startup person, a struggling, emerging business person. How can we possibly expect those people to understand the complexity of some of these regulations and how they are implemented when you look at them and intuitively know that they're just so varied and complex? So I try to look at those things from those perspectives. Some of the challenges, I wrote down a few things, and I hope we can get to them in the discussion. And I try to bring these points out. From a general contractor's perspective and from all of us that are bidding on work, market conditions are abysmal. Profit margins in this line of work, heavy civil construction, transportation work, are not very great. If it was a lucrative business, I think there would be many, many folks trying to get involved in this business. It's a low bid marketplace. Cost is a concern. General contractors at the end of the day are measured on who has the lowest bid. And I fully understand and try to have as much empathy as possible that emerging businesses have a very difficult time, and Dr. Meyer touched on this a little bit, have a very difficult time being competitive because of access to credit, because of a type of work in the marketplace that's very capital intensive. You just don't go out tomorrow and decide you're going to start a concrete paving business. You have very expensive equipment involved. You have skill sets you need, and you have training you need, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have to go out and compete with the big guys. And you have to compete on price, and that's very difficult. So this debundling conversation, I think, is very important. And let me wrap my remarks by talking a little bit about debundling. And I've had these conversations with a number of folks in the room in the past. It's an important conversation to have. I think if you talk to folks from the owner's side of the table about where contracts are heading these days, you don't hear a lot about let's take contracts and let's divide them up into pieces of work, and let's take a project and extend the amount of time it may take to deliver that project. I think what you're seeing intuitively is bigger contracts, shorter times to deliver, greater demand from the public to get things done quicker, better, faster, and get out of the way. And that creates inherent conflict with this idea of debundling. And I think there is absolute merit in that, absolutely with respect to what I said about trying to break these contracts into manageable pieces and skill sets that emerging businesses can have the ability to compete for. And it's not an easy answer. It takes commitment. It takes a passion to be part of it to make things better. And I think we've made a little progress. So in the interest of time, Lee, I'm going to leave my remarks at that, and hopefully maybe we can move on to questions or wherever the agenda takes us. So.
Wow. We've covered a lot of territory here in just these opening remarks. And I've got a lot of questions, but I'm not going to ask questions. I'm going to turn it over to you as participants to ask the questions. So who wants to start? Do we have mics here, by the way? If you could, was somebody back here? I thought I saw a hand.
You might have to start with the question.
I might have to start with a question. I want to make sure you have the chance first if you want to. Okay. You know, I know. I just want to build on this last comment about what I see in the transportation area, and I have to admit I'm not an expert in this area. I know there's a lot of issues that need to be dealt with here, and I think the panelists have all talked about them. But I do know that this issue of quicker, better, faster is clearly in the transportation policy area. That's something that everybody really want to get the projects done on a very quick timetable, and I think Federal Highway and MnDOT folks as well as Metro Council folks would say that's the case. Is this issue of unbundling inconsistent with that quicker, better, faster? Go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I'd like to respond to that question. You know, over the years, in good times and bad times, we've had this issue. And responding to the gentleman on my right's notion about the contractors, the general contractors, being under stress, as it were, to get these contracts out and the public perception, et cetera, et cetera. But the real deal is, whether it be good times or bad times, minorities have had a hard time. And you know, we always run up against these objections to these programs based upon, well, we can't do it now for some reason or another. And there's a plethora of excuses as to why you can't do it. And it's kind of unfortunate because really, in the scheme of things, it wouldn't take much. Let me just expound on that a little bit. You know, the large general contractors, they make room for who they want to make room for. They have a side practice in which white males and people who they choose to be intervened in the system, they make room for them regardless of what the circumstances are, their relatives, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and on. So at the end of the day, it's important for us to understand that, just backing up on what Dr. Myers said, is that prior to 1964, we had some serious situations in this country. We had people who were out in the streets, clamoring about the disparities in our communities, and we see our communities going backwards. And so, you know, those of us who pay taxes, and I'm sure you Minnesotans pay taxes too, you're not getting any return on your dollars based upon what the numbers represent. So I say all that to say this: the general contractors, you know, they have so much discretion. If you guys only knew the discretion that the general contractors have in terms of determining the economic well-being of who works for them and how they do business, then you would have to understand that there's no excuses for the zeros and the less than 0.5% of 1% participation of minorities on these projects. There's no excuses, and I'm just not buying it. I don't think you should buy it.
Well,
go ahead.
Lee, you asked the question, are they mutually exclusive of one another? And I guess I would have to say they're not mutually exclusive of one another. But it does require additional planning on the very front end to decide to unbundle a contract. I think you heard Wanda say that. But right now, we have in the past been in a very production-oriented approach of getting projects out the door. And as part of that, we are under a push to get them out the door faster, quicker, better, and we're using means such as design, build, and others. So I say that because also we've got a lot of general contractors who don't particularly care for those because they say that really puts them in the mode of not being able to get the jobs against the firms such as Granite and whoever, who are much larger firms than what we typically have here in Minnesota and other places. So yes, it does. But every project we put out the door is not a large design build project. Most of our projects, I would say, are probably less than $20 million. Can we unbundle those? Yes, but you don't start unbundling a contract in December that you're going to let in January. You've got to start earlier, and I think that's where we are right now with MnDOT is having that discussion about what to unbundle. If it's something that's on the prime contractor's critical path, and that's a critical item, it's probably not going to be beneficial to unbundle that at the same time that you're trying to deliver something quicker, faster, and better. But there are probably many other things in the contract, such as seating, clearing and grubbing, striping, security, that we can look at unbundling that we just haven't probably looked at in the past. And that's an admission. We haven't really looked at those things in the past in a lot of states, not just Minnesota, but in a lot of states. We are now having examples from the Marquette interchange and other places where we have unbundled, and it has been successful. But to do that, we have to look at the jobs that we're going to let, not this year, but next year or the year after, and pick consciously the parts that we're going to unbundle. But now when we do that, and this is where I have the rub, when we do that, you have to bid. If I break it up and unbundle it, and then we turn around and I see the same primes because you didn't bid, then I haven't been successful in what I was trying to accomplish. And sadly for me, that has happened in 2 different states. So I don't come into this necessarily wanting to unbundle because my experience has not been good. But I'm putting that aside and saying, we'll try it again. And that's why we need you at the table. When we start talking about unbundling, what are we unbundling? If you're all trucking firms, we're not going to unbundle trucking. So we have to have a real honest conversation about what is it that can be unbundled based on the makeup of the DBEs we have in Minnesota. And that takes some discussion.
When one of the things that you really do, like I said from the very beginning, everyone in your organization needs to know what the program is all about. And as others have said up here, you don't start in December for a January project. They have to have that philosophy about unbundling from the top. Then what has to happen is, as he said, you have to bid, but we also have to ensure that we get the data to ensure that we do have a program. Because if that data is not there, if you're not bidding, if you're not being part of the process, which at the Metropolitan Council, we have that. So we have the data that shows unbundling is a good thing, showing that the smaller contracts are something that we can absolutely ensure that happens. But we need to ensure that everybody has that philosophy. Everybody knows that, from the project manager to the planner to all the way to the top, as I said before, they all have to know that in order for it to work.
I just want to build on what Wanda said about data and looking at that data. Em and I talk about collaborations and relationship building and everything, but when it comes down to it, you got to show results.
You have to have the data.
And without looking at the data first, you don't know where kind of you're going. And the data that we've seen is, where we've seen greater participation is in our design build projects that Darrell mentioned. We're able to have it be a bigger project where the contractor can debundle, subcontract out more of the softer side of the project. 35W Bridge, 15.3%, and some of our other big projects, we have seen greater participation on design build. So, we haven't debundled as much as we like within MnDOT. We are approaching it. We've been meeting with the district engineers for probably over a year now to talk about the various projects coming up, because like you said, we need to plan way out there in a STIP that's 10 years out. We need to start planning for some of those projects 3 years down, and I think we're starting to do that. But right now, our greater participation is coming as design build projects in the state of Minnesota. It was interesting to note, however, we just finished kind of looking at the results of DBE participation in the state for the federal fiscal year, and we send a report to FHWA. In the first half, the first 6 months of the year, we were at 6.1%, and then the second half, which is our heavy construction side, we kind of dropped off to 5%. And we were looking at the numbers to see what was the difference in that, even that 1% difference, and it was that we had 2 DBEs bidding as primes in the first 6 months of the year, which made a huge difference. So when, DBEs are allowed to bid as primes, debundle the project, the greater participation occurs and allows our numbers to go up in the state of Minnesota. So I agree with that piece of it, that I think debundling is going to be something that we're going to be really looking forward